Welcome everybody. If you're from my class, please go ahead and sign in to the chat or the Q&A. Sign into the chat and then we're going to put our questions in the Q&A box. Either way. I want to welcome Carolyn Castaño to the class. Carolyn Castaño is a Los Angeles-based artist whose work in painting, drawing, video, and mixed media installation has been exhibited both nationally and internationally. I want to thank you, Carolyn, for coming to speak to us. This is part of our Teaching and Socially Engaged Artists series here at Cal State Fullerton, sponsored by both the College of the Arts, Grand Central Art Centers, and the Association of Historic Curators. Carolyn is the recipient of a Joan Mitchell Foundation grant for painters and sculptors in 2013, the California Community Foundation Getty Fellow Mid-Career Grant in 2011, and the City of Los Angeles Individual Artist Grant. She's had many solo exhibitions, and I'm just going to briefly mention a few because there are so many on her list. It's like 4 pages long. Most recently at Walter Maciel Gallery, Kontainer Gallery, Lombard-Freid Gallery in New York. She was recently the subject of a career retrospective at the Laband Art Gallery at Loyola Marymount University. And she has an upcoming solo exhibition at the Orange County Museum of Art. I'm sure she'll talk about both of those exhibitions today. She has a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the San Francisco Art Institute and a Master's in Fine Art from the UCLA School of Art and Architecture. She's taught at UCLA School of Art and Architecture, Chapman University, Cal State University San Bernardino, Riverside Community College, and she's currently an assistant professor of painting and drawing at Long Beach City College in Long Beach, California. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Mariana, for inviting me to speak to your class. And thank you, Cal State Fullerton and the Association of Historic Curators and Brand Arts. I'm really excited to be here and to share with you my work. I understand we have about 45 minutes or a little less. And I'm really digging your painting and your background, Mariana. So I guess I'm just going to jump into screen share here. Oops. And we're way, it should be over here. Okay. So hopefully you can see that. Oops. Oh, it's going to work like that. Okay. My work, even though I'm mostly known as a painter, drawer, artist, I really work in a variety of mediums such as installation, I make video art, and painting and drawing, and also photography. I think of all of those as really being tied to my painting practice. And I'm kind of coming to terms with the maybe idea that my painting and drawing is more painting and drawing in the expanded field, and thinking about how these formats can actually exist and commingle in other formats, such as drawing in painting, or drawing and painting in a textile, painting as part of an installation, painting as furniture, photography in painting, right? And how all of these can go back and forth. For the last, I don't know how long, well, I would say like 7 or 8 years, my work has really been looking at the lives and stories of women, particularly women from Latin America, and then specifically women from Colombia, where my family is from. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, but my parents are from Colombia. That's Colombia with 2 O's, not with the U, which is somewhere over here in the States, but they're all related, right? And so my work has been about kind of exploring the stories of women from Latin America and from Colombia, but also their relationship to the environment and the landscape. I wanted to share with you, we're going to go way back to the work that really started it. This first project is called Mujeres que Crean, or Women Who Create, and it's named after a nonprofit in Medellin, Colombia, that works with women who are survivors of Colombia's armed conflict. Colombia went through a, well, I would say, yeah, like 60-year, almost 60-year civil conflict in the countryside, predominantly with kind of Marxist guerrillas and the Colombian army, and then paramilitary groups, which were funded by, wealthy landowners and other people who wanted to also fight and for land and kind of deter the guerrillas. So after 60 years of war, nobody knew who was right or what was really the right way to go. So finally, a few years ago, a peace treaty was negotiated, and the country is now in peace, somewhat, although it's created other issues, and it's not really totally at peace, but that's another story. So I went to Medellin, Colombia as part of a residency at a place called Casa Tres Patios, the house with 3 patios or 3 yards. And I worked with a group of women from Women Who Create. And together we looked at representations of women in art history and European art history, and also Colombian art history and representation in colonial era paintings and sculptures and statues throughout the country of famous imagery. Many are of colonial era heroines, but also indigenous heroines or mythological, mythological figures. And the women chose to represent women that they felt a relationship with. And then we made a video with the women interpreting these different paintings and sculptures of different women that we looked at together. We also looked at and talked about the role of nature in their lives. Many of these women had escaped the countryside where the conflict had been based and went, to the cities looking for peace and for better lives. And so we talked about the role of nature, what they remembered from their previous lives, how birds and flowers figured in songs and poetry and writings that they knew about, or maybe areas where they were from. And so the women and I made drawings together of birds, flowers, trees from Colombia. And so wanted to really connect the role of, we'll go on to the next one, the role of these women and also the role of the environment. And so in conflict, usually we focus on people and how people are affected, and specifically in their case, women and families, children, but also the environment, right? Wherever the conflict happens, people are affected, but also the trees, the flowers, the plants, the landscape, the rivers. So this is a series of portraits based on photographs of the women and their original watercolor and gouache drawings that I had printed or translated onto acrylic film that was then placed inside a Duratrans, or the Duratrans, I guess, is the acrylic film, but inside a light box. And then the 3 light boxes were shown in a blackened out room. And so it became almost like a very, almost like a sacred space, a very meditational space. And the light box effect made or transformed the women almost into like sacred portraits or like stained glass that you would see in a church. So this is at the New Americans Museum in San Diego, projection of Doña Rosa. And you can see in the picture, she's holding a photograph of her husband, her brother, and her son, who were all killed throughout her lifetime in the armed conflict. And so the women incorporated objects from their home or their personal, photographs of their loved ones. And as part of their props to represent the women that they were interpreting. So this is Nuri, and she chose the Pieta. And so in it, she's holding, it's really just fabric and flowers. And she talked about her son died actually it was more like street violence in Medellin, but she never knew that he had died for several months and had to go to the morgue and identify his body. And so she talked to me about how she wishes she would have been there to hold him and, hold him in his last moments. And so I love the way that she really kind of owned that figure of the Pieta and like really brought back those feelings, or I mean, I think maybe not brought back, those feelings are in her still. And so, and you see in the background, there's drawings of flowers that the women made, and I brought all the drawings back with me to LA and worked with an animator to animate the drawings of that the women made. So this work really took me to thinking about the landscape in Colombia, the environment, and how it really figures in all of these stories. A lot of the women are from towns along the Magdalena River, which is Colombia's longest and biggest river waterway. And so you see there in the map, it's from the north in the Caribbean all the way down to the kind of end of the country. And it's the main waterway that was used during the colonial period to bring in, colonialists, or as a friend put it, developers, and also slave labor from Africa. It was also the river that was used to export, right, mineral wealth and from Colombia, gold, emeralds, coal, and lumber, rubber, right, all back out to Europe and to the United States. And so to this day, 2020, the Magdalena River is still a site of contention, a site of conflict. During the armed conflict, there's many stories of bodies being found floating down the river. Now, since the conflict has ended, and I keep doing the quotes, the river is now a site of environmental conflict, because now that it is safe to be in these areas, or in this more remote areas of the country, it has opened up the way for developers and multinational companies to come into Colombia and mine in areas that previously no one would go to, right, and pollute the waterways for people of these towns. And the Magdalena River site of several damming projects that are being constructed to harness the power of the river. And those are kind of deals that are going to companies from China, from the Middle East, from Europe. This is also from the show at the New Americans Museum. It's a 24 by 30 inch watercolor and gouache drawing that I had printed onto canvas fabric and then converted into a large textile piece, a curtain piece. This is called Double Paradise, and it's speaking to the Magdalena River, to these rivers in Colombia as being paradise, but also being almost like a mirage or something you can't quite focus on. And so Colombia is one of the top 5 environmentally diverse countries in the world, but it's also one of the sites of conflict, right, for this diversity of water, of minerals, of flora and fauna. And so this piece, I can't take full credit for it. It was inspired by a Colombian artist named Beatriz Gonzalez, who's still alive today. And she's, this is one of her paintings there on the left, or the painting that inspired her curtain piece. And Beatrice is Colombia's pop artist. And from the 70s, 60s, 70s on, Beatrice has been appropriating popular imagery, commercial imagery from the newspaper, from products that Colombians consume, from photographs, and turning those in, using those in her artwork. And so this is a piece she had silk screened of, it's like aristocrats, right? And she turned it into a curtain. So almost, right, Colombia is a very kind of divided country of haves up here, and then a lot of more have-nots, and the haves are maybe, like in many places, totally oblivious to what everybody else is going through. And so she kind of made them into this like banal object, like into a curtain piece. And so I really loved that idea and saw it for, my piece as a site of, my piece is about also these stories of these women and how, where they came from, right? The domestic space that they created, and the curtain piece becomes like refers to this home, right? And being a domestic space, but also it becomes like a theatrical curtain, right? And kind of connecting to like the theater of war. What am I doing on time? Okay. So around this time, I also started looking at the drawings of Prussian, right, botanical explorer Alexander von Humboldt, who was a scientist and botanical, thinker, scientist who traveled the Americas, and he made all the measurements of the mountaintops and the rivers, and made collected flowers and plants and made studies of them, and brought artists with him to make drawings of the different places that he went to. And he traveled to Colombia and Venezuela. So you probably see his name, like Humboldt University, right? Comes from Alexander von Humboldt. And he was really like a lover, I think, of, right, nature. But what he really created was a map, right? A cartography of what was in these remote places and how to get there. This is von Humboldt botanical drawings. And his work really started this like craze, right, for other botanical scientists to travel to the Americas, and also for artists to travel to the Americas to paint from nature, from the landscape, or to work from the drawings that they saw that he brought back, and other scientists. So this is etchings by Albert Berg, who was an English artist, and he made these drawings called Physiognomy of the Tropical Vegetation of South America and the Magdalena River Valley from 1854. And so he makes these drawings of the Magdalena River, but what I found was so interesting about them is they evoke, all the beauty and the lushness of the nature. There's some animals on the image on the right, but none of the trauma of the colonial period, right? All of that is missing. And so I decided to take his drawings and appropriate them and use kind of the armature, the general composition of his drawings, and then make them my own and kind of incorporate elements of that, that trauma. So this is one of my, after Albert Berg's tropical physiognomy. And so I've included like parts of bodies. This is a head, and maybe there'll be a hand peeking out, or eyes, and then some of the birds from Colombia. And these are pretty large. They're about 51 inches across and 6 feet, 60 inches down. And they're watercolor, gouache, acrylic, and ink, and sometimes oil pastel. And they're also a kind of a an excuse, right, to play with figuration and abstraction in them. Parts of the leaves and the figures are then contrasted with elements of more like abstract moments in the background that are made in oil pastel and ink. This is at part of the SUR Biennial at the Manhattan Beach Arts Center. So if you're not familiar with the SUR Biennial, that's a biennial or a series of exhibitions that happens every 2 years throughout Southern California. It was started by an artist curator named Ron Lopez and well, several folks, one of them, Robert Miller from Rio Hondo College, Max Presnil, and then a few other people. And they were thinking about how to bring art to this area of Southern California, and particularly the community colleges and state colleges. But also it's called the SUR Biennial, like the South Biennial. And so artists who look to or consider, right, we're right next to Mexico, right, to a whole nother world. But somehow it's like very, very far away in our mind and imaginary. So it's artists who deal with this proximity to the South, to look to the South or engage the South. You don't have to be Latino to be in this show. It's more about the work engaging maybe this conversation with the South. So I have kept looking at paintings, right, of the Americas. So from von Humboldt, it sparked this whole kind of trend, right, of artists painting the landscape and looking to the Americas. This is Frederick Edwin Church, who was an American painter, Heart of the Andes. And so Frederick Edwin Church painted these paintings of, right, areas in South America. And a lot of them are almost like composites, like pre-Photoshop. He put them together from other, you know, photographs that he saw or drawings that he put together, or maybe he could go to one place but not another, and he would bring it together. I love this painting, Cotopaxi, so by Frederick Edwin Church. And so these are from the Romantic era of landscape painting. So these paintings are supposed to evoke the sublime, this kind of idea of nature and beauty of nature and God, right? And being in nature is going to sort of create this moment of transcendence. But they're also a way of evoking this idea of manifest destiny. Like these are the countries or the lands that we're going to go to and be ours. Ours meaning the United States and Europe and Western imperialism. So those paintings and other sources have become a great source of inspiration for my work in drawing and painting. I've been looking at the landscape paintings, but also at what has been being called Andean geometries, Andean kind of alchemies or Amazonian alchemies, basically like symbols, right, from this area made by pre-Columbian cultures, indigenous cultures, as ways to imagine or to picture, right, the natural environment. So in some of these images, these are from pictographs found throughout Colombia and Peru and Ecuador, different areas, but these shapes are repeat right throughout the region, and textiles and cave drawings and paintings and pictographs carved onto the side of mountains, ceramic vessels and gold figurines. So we have this swirling snake shape. We have other shapes that are supposed to evoke like frogs, this triangle shape, this circular kind of swirl snake shape. And so I think of these as being in direct contrast and opposition to the like Western European or American way of imagining, I'm doing this, of picturing the landscape, which is this very horizontal format. And in my drawings, I started incorporating these kind of shapes into drawings of the landscape. I'm also looking at European drawings and illustrations of kind of alchemy, right, and ways of understanding the universe, of also interpreting, or alchemy was a study or an early, like kind of pre-science of understanding, right, or imagining how we could make gold, or trying to make gold from these different processes. Also looking at one example is like the Wayu culture from Colombia. They're a community from the north of Colombia who make these amazingly beautiful mochilas and hammocks and textile fabrics that incorporate these kind of Andean, Amazonian shapes, right, that are repeated. And also the amazing vibrancy of the colors. They're very like psychedelic, very pop. And also the way that they're engaging in like modernism, right? A modernism that is maybe before or simultaneous to modernism, or our Western modernism. So these are some of my interpretations. I call them tropical geometries and Ruana interruption. And a Ruana is a South American word for like a poncho or a serape. And so my shapes are bifurcating or interrupting the landscape, creating almost like vortices or other kind of openings, right, into the landscape. And so I've continued to look at drawings, photographs, study the fauna and flora of areas like Colombia, because I mean, that's sort of the area, the region that I'm interested in, or that I dream about, right, of going to, returning to. And so these are acrylic and watercolor and gouache on paper, on watercolor paper. You can see this one is called Los Farallones, which is a mountain range near Cali, where my family is from in Colombia. So that brings us to my recent, oh no, not yet. Sorry. This is called, this is the Temple of the Sun in Sogamoso, Colombia, which is a Muisca astronomical kind of center or sun observational temple made by the Muisca, who were pre-conquest indigenous tribe from Colombia, who's left, you know, evidence, right, of their society and their culture for us to all see. So last year in the fall, I had a solo show at the Walter Maciel Gallery called Valley of the Sun. And in the Valley of the Sun, I play with shapes from the Colombian kind of a system of imagery, right, from these shapes that we saw earlier. And then I interconnected them with the landscape and also textile patterns that you would see in fabrics in the Americas. So this one is called Valley of the Sun. And this is another one. Started using these circular motifs that are like the sun shapes, but also like the shapes that you would see in Western alchemy. And they're almost like lenses where you zoom in and out, drawings of the orchids and different plants native to Colombia. So another one. And I've been looking at the birds native to Colombia, and to Cali is known as a bird paradise. Like every year, hundreds of American and European and other, folks from around the world flock to Cali to a bird fair that's very popular. And I was planning on going this past February, but didn't go. And I guess it was for a good thing, since that was sort of when, a lot of folks who were traveling got COVID-19. It's also a orchid paradise, very popular with orchid hunters. So that brings me to my current project, which is, you can see at the Orange County Museum of Art. It just opened last week, and it's called Cali is Cali, or Cali is Cali. And in this show, I take, I'm using the archive of my father's archive of photographs, films, and videos to kind of make a connection between the landscape and also the experience of immigrants, or the lives of immigrants in the United States. So my father took and collected over 4,000 analog photographs, and there's more that are in the digital era, that are in CD-ROMs, right? And so when he passed away, I was able to kind of go through and catalog all of these photographs and count them. And we always thought that there was maybe a few hundred, where it turned out that there was like over 4,000 of them. And they're from the late 50s through 2011 or 2013 when he passed away. And so I started really thinking about, one is how, because he was, to be honest, a hoarder, right? But he collected all of these. He really kept everything for this whole time. And so it really showed this timeline of this family from in Colombia, then traveling to the United States, living here, and then also a time period where we went back to Colombia and then decided to come back to the United States. So it shows this whole timeline of our family, relatives, but also friends of the family from the Colombian community, but also from the community from the Mexican American and Central American community, where he ran a print shop in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. So for the show, I sort of, my intervention into the photographs was to think about the ways that the landscape figures in the immigrant imaginary. I also incorporated kind of shapes and symbols that come from or allude to the gold empire from Colombia. And so the symbols of gold are from the indigenous cultures in Colombia, but also are viewed or maybe felt as like national symbols, right? A national patrimony, or ways that Colombians identify. So I was looking at this map on the left from the last Pacific Standard Time show that looked at the Americas, and the show at the Getty called, it was like the Gold Empires, and it looked at the tradition of gold and decorative arts throughout the Americas, of like jade and gold and other, silver. And so in this map, it shows how, the trade, right, in gold and then other kind of jade, did I already say jade, right, traveled up and down. So basically from the Incan Empire all the way to southern Mexico, there was this trade of goods, right, back and forth. And so I find this like so interesting, like that this kind of transference of information, of material wealth, but also of people, right, traveling up and down from these regions. So this idea of migration or immigration has been happening for a really long time. So in the show, I made a series of drawings with these different symbols that come from the gold cultures, or allude to the gold cultures. Also was looking at migratory bird patterns, and kind of studying those and the travel of birds from the North America, northern hemisphere to the south and back and forth. So this is from my earlier wall that you saw, image of photographs and drawings. This is the Cali Escali collage wall that's at the Orange County Museum of Art, more finished, more polished. And so the title of the show is Cali Escali, comes from a Colombian expression from Cali, which means basically like Cali is Cali. There's no place like home, like Cali. But it also, I'm kind of playing with that expression and thinking about going back to Cali, or the LL Cool J song. Is that what it's called? So thinking about Cali, Colombia, but also California. And then drawings, I mix in reprinted enlargements of original photographs with real photographs, with family ephemera like airline tickets and high school graduation announcements, stickers, and religious ephemera. This is a collection of passports that my dad had, all his from Colombia, sort of, you know, as they expired, to the last one in the United States. And he had others in the United States, but this is the one that I have, the most recent one. So kind of see that as like this kind of timeline, right, of his migration. This is a postcard that, the back of a photo postcard that he sent my mom and my older brother in March 1963. And so he basically, you know, it's like a love letter postcard saying, you know, with all my heart, I'm waiting for you in this land. And hopefully, so my brother was 1 year old. He was a 1 year old. And he's saying, I hope that your second birthday will be here in Los Angeles. But in the collage wall and throughout the show, I really pair the photographs with drawings of the landscape to think about the way the landscape figures in the imaginary of the immigrant, in the landscape, the photographs, like this is my dad on the left, he's standing in New York, right? And he's in a landscape. But I think of these photographs as also metaphorically, the person is looking out to the future, but also the past, or where they came from, the landscape of their past is also embedded in this photograph. So there's other arrangements like that of photographs of my grandmother and my aunts, my cousin Lou. There's other, you know, postcard from Cali, and then one of my dad's first license, California license. It's like laminated, and then he taught driving school for a little while. So in the collage, there's drawings of birds. This is the Blackpoll warbler, and then tickets I found in, you know, the stuff, the archive, many airline tickets that had been saved, or suitcase tickets. So this is from Avianca and Eastern Airlines. And so here, the photographs juxtaposed with drawings of the landscape with these kind of motifs from the Gold Empire in Colombia. One kind of series of things. So the image on the right is a ruana that belonged to my grandmother, and had traveled from Colombia with my aunt on the left. She's holding it there, getting off the planes, my Aunt Fabiola. And so the ruana traveled throughout the family and somehow and ended up in my as my property several years ago. I don't remember how, but I had it, and it's kind of this family heirloom at this point, and it's like way too heavy to wear in Southern California. It's really made for being like in the top of the Andes or higher altitudes. But the left is my aunt getting off the plane. It's back when you could greet your family or friends, you know, on the tarmac. And so what I found really interesting is just behind her, if you can see, it says Mexican. So I'll just leave that there. It's a photograph of my parents and other family. I don't know why it's distorted like that, but PowerPoint did weird things to my images. So also part of the show, I have enlarged a collection of passport photos or ID photographs that my dad had, and he didn't take any of these, but he collected them. And so, and then I also have a tabletop display case or vitrine with different objects that have been passed down throughout the family or have survived, you know, the several moves. So here, the different passport photos have been enlarged. And so what I find really interesting about them is their different, you know, personalities that are showing through, their kind of sense of self that's coming through, their passport photos or ID photos from another era, like a time when people would dress up to have an official, you know, government photo taken. They wouldn't smile. They're very serious. And so it's my dad on the left, and my dad, you know, sort of in the early years and later on in the 80s, then my Aunt Fabiola, my uncle, Jose Maria, my brother as a baby, and then that's me as a baby on the right, and then my brother as a teenager, my brother is a 10-year-old, and my grandfather from my mother's side, and my grandmother from my mother's side. Also as part of the show, I mean, the show also talks about home, right? And what makes a home, and home traveling, kind of home in different areas in Colombia and LA. Also part of the show are these bubble chairs, which were in my home growing up in Los Angeles, but they really came, well, one of them came from Colombia. My dad's business partner in Colombia had a fiberglass furniture company, and they made knockoffs of modernist furniture from the 60s, 70s, and sold them. And at some point in the 80s, my dad brought one back to LA and brought the molds, and then proceeded to make reproductions, make more bubble chairs in our garage in the back. And so then they became part of our, you know, our living room furniture, clashing with all of my mom's like colonial, New England colonial era furniture. Then we had these bubble chairs. So the chairs for me kind of connect to this idea of how like modernism, right, is interpreted sometimes in the Americas, like reinvented or made, kind of made their own through, you know, kind of reinvention or copy sometimes. And this is just a table in my studio of, you know, the different photographs. One of the objects in the vitrine is a Thomas Brothers maps, which I don't know if many of you know what that is, but it's a collection of maps of LA, California, LA County and Orange County. And so my dad always had them because he taught driving school and drove around Los Angeles everywhere. But the one that remained is from 1971, which is the year I was born. So I thought that really meant something. So that is it. Do I have any questions? Oh, here they are. Okay.
Yeah, you got a couple that are sort of related. So let me read Lizette Garcia, and then very similar is, I believe, Kristen, or no, let's see, I'm not sure. When painting, do you ever lose inspiration? And if so, how do you gain it back? And then another student asked about if you ever feel like giving up, and is that part of your, April asked about if you ever giving up, what do you think about or think to motivate yourself again?
Okay. Well, what was the first one?
What, when painting, do you ever lose inspiration? And if so, how do you gain it back?
Oh, yes. Yeah, all the time. I think, well, my husband makes fun of me because he says I change my art all the time, or every few years. I kind of shake it up and do something slightly different. And in some art circles, that's like a no-no, right? You're supposed to kind of, if you found your thing that people respond to, you're supposed to create the same painting over and over and over again until you die. And some artists can really do that and be happy with it. It's very almost like monk-like. And other artists kind of orbit around a few different things, and maybe at the end of their life you see a through line. And I don't know where, you know, if where I'm at in that, but I think maybe that's my solution to being, you know, bored or running out of ideas, like kind of reinventing what I'm doing, or thinking of other ways to kind of answer the same questions. And yeah, I mean, I feel like giving up all the time. I think it's really hard to make art, and especially, you know, nowadays in this situation, right, in like quarantine and lockdown and being on Zoom, like my butt's been glued to this chair for like 6 months now. It's hard to make art, but you have to think you have to, in a way, push yourself to get past that and to keep producing something. And also not to be so hard on yourself, right? If you stop making art for some reason, you'll always pick it up again. And some of those, like the drawings that were converted to the curtain piece, or the drawings that were converted to the light box, actually came out of a period right after I had had my first son, where, you know, as a new mom, you're like at home, I'm away from my studio, or it's harder to get away. I can't, you know, stay out till 2 in the morning painting, you know, massaging my painting, and I had to be at home. And so, but I could work, you know, on my kitchen table in my living room after hours, or when everybody's asleep, and go crazy and do whatever I want. So I kind of call that work like kitchen feminist artworks or paintings, because I could make, you know, a table size artwork and then put it away, you know, by 11 o'clock or midnight, and then, or later sometimes, and no one would ever know, right? That time is mine. But then I could turn something small and kind of modest into like something like monumental, or make it like be several artworks in one. Like I could make the drawing, which is one artwork. I could make it, then I can make it into a curtain, or I could make that drawing into a couch. I could make it into a movie, you know, I can make it into so many things, and actually give that 3 hours like a lifespan that's longer. So that was one solution.
This is an interesting question. I see a lot of your art depicts a contrast of geometric versus organic shapes. Can you talk about your inspiration for that choice, or what brought you to discover that beautiful contrast? This is Riley Holmquist's question.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of, what happened? Oh, some of my bodies of work kind of get started actually through happy accidents or experimentation, and having an idea or things that I'm attracted to, and going from there. A series I didn't include in the slide talk were a series of paintings that I did that were exhibited at the LAX airport at the Southwest Terminal 1 as part of their art exhibition program. And I had applied for a show there with another body of work that I didn't show you for time's sake, that were portraits of friends and students and family juxtaposed with hard edge patterns and shapes from fashion, from commerce, from textiles. And so I had applied with this work, but then they went through renovations and didn't contact me for like 4 years or something. And so then they contacted me and they were like, we're ready for you to show your work. And by that time I had moved on. I was making the Women Who Create and other bodies of work. I just really changed my mindset, and I just felt like I can't go back, as much as I would love to have the show and like make my body make the paintings I had proposed. I just couldn't do it. So I kind of sat and thought about it, and I was looking at these landscape paintings, the drawings I had made with the Magdalena River, and how I really wanted to stay on that path. But you know, you can't show like paint artwork that is like going to freak people out at the airport, right? They have like certain regulations. And so like floating heads down a river might not work well. And, you know, it has to be sort of appease people and make them feel it's okay to fly. And so I kind of created, you know, was drawing, and I brought back these geometric shapes and hard-edged patterns, but I was this time thinking more about, in my proposal, I had talked about looking at the patterns from airline design and airline tails from like the 60s and 70s, and how I really love those. And so I combined those with pictures of with drawings of the landscape. So that kind of opened up a whole world of way of working. And also a colleague of mine gave me like a giant stack of like 50-inch watercolor paper that I used to make the drawings for the airport. And they were really, it was like this like, you know, godsend kind of thing, goddess send. So that kind of started a way of working that I'm still working in today.
Let's see, this is from Megan and Julie have similar questions. When did you know you want to be an artist? You wanted to be an artist, and when did you decide to pursue art as a career? And that's Julie's question, Julie Long.
Well, I didn't know I wanted to be an artist until I was in college. I think in junior high and high school, I've got into art through, well, my entree into the art, kind of larger artsy things or art world was through fashion and music and going clubbing and all of those things. And so it really opened up a way of being in the world that spoke to me, that I wanted to be in. To my parents, shock, and they're like, "What? That's too much blue eyeshadow." But when I actually went to community college. I went to Pasadena City College and Glendale Community College and started taking art classes. And I just really fell in love with art and wanting to make art. So that's
awesome.
the answer.
Yeah. Let's see. How do you come about your ideas, or do they randomly come to you? That's you sort of answered that a little bit, but this is a great aspect of the question, is do you always do research beforehand when creating cultural pieces? Alan's question. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit of both, like just daydreaming and being inspired by something that I saw, or a color or a shape, imagery that I'm interested in, and then doing the research and investigating around it, and kind of learning more, like most of our ideas or images that we have come from somewhere. Like, where did they inspire you? Or, there's times I've made something and then I'm like, oh, and then months later I see that it's somewhere else, like somewhere official, or it's like other people are doing it. I'm like, did I see that? And subliminally, it's subconsciously in my subconscious, and now I'm making it, or are they responding to me, or how did this come about? So I think it's daydreaming, it's research. With some of these, like the Women Who Create, before that project, I had made a series of paintings about women involved or affected by the drug wars. And this is why I applied for a residency in Colombia, because I wanted to work with women affected or involved in the narco trade. And so the organization I applied through found these nonprofits for me to work with, but they said, well, we have women affected by the drug wars, but they're not drug lords or girlfriends of drug. They're not involved in the drug trafficking. They're affected by the violence created by the drug wars. And so I was like, aha, you know, and that's, you know, that's actually makes a lot of, that makes sense. And actually, I want to meet these women too. And so that kind of took me kind of out of probably my sheer ignorance, like into this like deeper path, and that I was willing to go. And so I think, you know, as an artist, don't be too proud to go in a new direction that maybe that could be worthwhile exploring. Yeah.
Very good advice. How do you know
where I'm going? I'm like,
I
I'm
know.
halfway blind through it. Whereas some artists who are research-based are like very strict and scientific about it. I mean, that feels a little too uptight for me. Like, I feel like a little bit of both, which is, I don't know. You know.
Let's see.
I don't know if it's a good thing, but.
Of course, it's beautiful work. Let's see. This is from Keely Mickelson. How do you know when the environmental and social elements of your art have an impact on your audience?
Yeah, well, you know, I think that you sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't know. You know, in little ways, like when I had showed the women who create in San Diego, and members of the community saw that show, or just like regular, you know, moms, and saw the show, they were really affected by it and could really relate, because the women in the video are just regular women, everyday women, right? And so they, you know, that were like maybe some of the women who commented on it. The work that I showed at the airport, I mean, that was not in a typical art world space. It was at the airport in the baggage claim, where thousands of people come through every day. Most of them are not art world savvy, or they don't go to museums that much, or I don't know, right? There's a mix of everybody's there. But I got, you know, I don't know, not really hundreds, but many Instagram comments and posts, people sharing with me or finding me through Instagram saying, I love your work. Thank you for lightening, you know, my day. And I was like, and so that made me really happy. Like, wow, you know, it's just like, you know, and like, if it's a space like that, my mom could see it, like, that makes me, you know, if she says like, wow, then that makes me actually happier than like Fuchi Gucci Makuchi. Sometimes like, come on, Mr. Gucci.
Well, now building on that question, you've featured your mother in some of your works,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that's not the work that you focused on today. How did she feel about that, collaborating with you? And
I think, I mean, I did a video with her actually when I was in grad school, called Vanitas, and we're both dressed the same, and it's like a split screen video with her and sort of this going through this beauty ritual. And a lot of the beauty ritual is really her movements that I have observed throughout my whole life. And she was happy to, I mean, my mom's always been game for everything. And so she was really happy to be in it. But then later on, seeing it, she didn't really say much, but then some friends or relatives were like, oh, why, you know, are you making fun of your mom, or are you, or she looks old, or, and like, and I wasn't at all. Like, I really thought I was making, we're going way back, but at that point I was starting to make video and kind of film inspired video work. And I was really inspired by, films from the like 50s and 60s, from like the Italian neo-realists, or like Mexican cinema, and like how women are represented, like, these like gorgeous women with like big hair and like big hips, and like, and they're like fiery, or like they're these characters, they're really like these personas. And I wanted to make some video pieces or works that were like that. And that, when we were talking about how that era was like anti-identity art, that was my way of slipping in identity art without, like, I never talked about Latinos, but the women were all like these powerful Latinas. But I never mentioned it, but if you were observing it, you would see that, so I wanted to sort of film my mother like an Italian, like a Fellini character in a way. And now that she's a lot older, like, I see, like, she looks really young there. What are you guys talking about? And she looks gorgeous. Like,
she
but
totally
now
looks
in
like
this,
a character from a Fellini film. She is gorgeous. I'm surprised that anyone ever said that. She's stunning in that film.
yeah. So, and now in this Orange County show, actually, she's in the show a lot. And other members of the family are, and there's actually, I hope you get to see this show in person, because there's other walls that I didn't have good pictures of, so I didn't include, but there's one that's all reproductions of photos my dad took of her throughout LA, like as being like a tourist. And it's like the 60s, and she is like one of those characters. Like, I mean, God, the ladies would be in high heels and with a clutch purse like every day. Like, I'm like, give me what were those sweatpants that everybody was wearing a few years ago?
Oh my God.
I'll just say my leisure wear.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's very different. And your mom always is very dressed up when I see her at openings.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was one of the last openings I think I was able to go to before, I guess we both were able to go to right before COVID lockdown, because we were in a show together, and your mom was at that show. She's just a beautiful presence, like you are. You can see that you're very close to each other, which is really neat for me to see, or for, I think, for everybody to see. It's nice to see that you're close. I know artists are sometimes really rebel from their families, and I think that's part of the process of, forming your own identity as a human being. But it's nice to see how tight and how supportive she is of your work, and she seems to be like your #1 fan too, which is really sweet.
She's always asking me like, oh, is there an opening, and do you have invitations so I can invite my friends? And like, Mom, you don't have to invite like some people that, like, we don't know them. You don't have to invite the neighbor.
It's so sweet, though. I think it's awesome. What advice would you give, or do you have for students who want to pursue art but they feel nervous about it? This is from Kelly Dow.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say, if you want to pursue art, you should pursue art. And I think wherever, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it is a hard kind of career choice. Like, when speaking of my mom and, my parents, they didn't really didn't really go to college, or like did like 1 year or 2 years of college. I mean, it was also a different time when a lot of people didn't really go to college, or my mom went to secretarial school. But for her family, that was a working class Colombian family, going to secretarial school and being able to type and have an office job was like making it. And you would guarantee that you would have a job. And when, you know, in the 50s, right, as a, it was like a feminist move, right, to be able to have a job at an office. And so, you know, if you're going to be an artist, like can be a hard road, you know, to toe or to follow, because you're not like at the office, right? There's always going to be a call for secretaries, right? Or, you know, dentists or a doctor. But I mean, what do you have to do? Basically, you need to have a day job, right? Until, I mean, if you want to do it, you can do it, and you'll find a way to be able to pay your bills. So what you need to do is to have skills that are marketable, right? Unfortunately, society doesn't always pay us a salary, you know, weekly, monthly salary to be a painter, because those are like, they're kind of like, on one end considered things for like the wealthy, but on the other end, there are things that are very needed in order to have a society, to critique society, to talk about what even our fancies are, fantasies. So we need art. But so anyway, so I would just say, you know, I don't know, back when I was in school, they would tell us, you get a master's degree so that you could teach. And that's what I did. And I was an adjunct for many years. And then finally I was able to, you know, like get a full-time position, which is a little bit like winning the lottery. It's like, I got one, I'm not letting it go. And because my family, you know, I don't come from a wealthy family, but I went to school with folks that did. So they have other issues. But I've been able to support myself through teaching as an adjunct, through teaching at the museums, through doing everything, you know, being available to do anything and everything, until finally, you know, I built, you know, you build up your resume, and I graduated to qualifying to getting a full-time position somewhere. But what's happened in more recent times is that there's less and less of those jobs, or there's more artists and less of those teaching jobs. So like not everybody can be a teacher, or you might not, it's really a vocation in a lot of ways still. Like you have to love teaching, you have to feel good about what you're doing. And if you hate it, you're going to be miserable, right? Or you might not, it's hard to be an adjunct forever into your old age, although many of our colleagues do it. But you have to then, you know, you have to find a way to do it. So learn computer skills, website design, writing, grant writing. I mean, there's many things, many satellite careers that are part of the art world that will dovetail into your practice as an artist, and also that are part of your skill set that maybe, you know, like this is a secret, it's not a secret, but for a little time period, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to law school, because I realized when I was like 35, like, wow, I'm a lot smarter than all the assholes that I went to elementary school with that made me feel like a peanut, and they called me dumb and a beaner, you know, like, and bad names that gave me low self-esteem, you know, that I'm still dealing with. No, but I was like, you know, I would really love to have this other career, and maybe I would be good at it. But then I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to read all those documents. But as you get older, or maybe not now, guys are already old, but you figure out that you actually can be good at different things. And so figuring out what those things can be that can support your art practice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for visiting with us and for talking about us and showing us your gorgeous work today. And I have to say, that is the most amazing dress you have on. It looks like you are one of the models in your own painting.
Thank you.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thanks, everyone. Thank you for your questions. And please go see the show at Orange County. It's free. It's open, I think, Wednesday through Sunday, and with social distance, you know, masking, protocols. Also, there's going to be a webinar next Thursday at 5 p.m. with myself and several of the artists from the show. So I'll send you the link if folks want to, and it'll be more specific about the show and with the other artists. But at any time, if folks want to contact me, you can reach me, I think, through my website, or you can email me.
I will definitely give everyone your email as well so they can write you.
Okay.
If they'd like to write you. Thank you so much, Carolyn.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.